All right, guys. Happy New Year 2025. I hope it's been a good new year for all of you. Uh, James says, Happy New Year, Pete. Should we be worried that if Poch hasn't spoken to dual nationals like Brown or Chase, definitely don't want to lose either, and he doesn't seem interested in recruiting them? That's a great question. I'm actually going to address this in today's stream because it's one of the predictions that I have for 2025. But it is a fair thing to be worried about. Thank you, Judgmental Deity. I was in Yosemite for Christmas. I was also down with the flu over the holidays, and it was quite rough, actually. So it wasn't the greatest of New Year's, I'll be honest, but I'm happy that it was for a lot of people. And so I hope it was for a lot of you. Daniel, Happy New Year. By the way, I made the intro a little bit more quiet because a lot of people complained that it was too loud. So I reduced the volume by about 20% before I played it. I don't know if that registered at all or if there's something wrong with StreamYard itself, if maybe the intro is played at too loud of a volume, but I definitely reduced the actual volume of the clip. So I don't know if it is me or if it is StreamYard. So let me know if it was a little bit quieter this time. Good to see you, Derek. How you doing, Derek Ritchie? Happy New Year. Alan, thank you. And Derek says the intro needs more stepsister jokes. Ha ha. If we don't win both Gold Cup and Nations League, would that be a failure? Great question, IDKDK. I think it would be, yeah. I think it would be. And again, that's actually going to be one of the predictions that I'm going to talk about. But I think the expectations that we should have is to win the Gold Cup and the Nations League. We have the strongest roster, and we're playing both at home, right? So there's not really any excuses. We have to win both of them, in my opinion. Although I do think Canada is getting close in terms of quality and, really having a cohesive style of play. And you could even argue some of their center backs are better than ours, right? So actually in several positions, you could argue they have stronger players. But overall, we are still the stronger roster, and I think we should expect to win at home, right? We would have had said the same thing for Greg Berhalter. Pete, take a look at James's question at the top of the chat. James. Yeah, that's the one I'm responding to, RCP, about that's the same standards we held Greg and BJ to. Yeah, 100%. 100%. Do you think Griffin Dorsey makes a January camp? I don't think so, but you never know. Let's see. Well, the January camp's supposed to come out tomorrow, by the way. So we'll see what it looks like. Before we get into the predictions, though, thank you to Bet Online for sponsoring this stream. You guys can use my code BLEAV to check it out. All right. Number one, the USMNT will win the Nations League and the Gold Cup. So these are my 10 predictions. And maybe at the end of the year, we can look back on these 10 predictions and see which one I got right. Maybe some I did, maybe some I didn't, but these are just my 10 predictions. So the USMNT will win both. I don't think it will be particularly easy. I think we'll end up facing Canada in the Nations League final. And I think that will be a tough game, but I think we'll still manage to win it. And then I think the Gold Cup we will end up winning, considering we're going to bring our A team. So that is prediction number one. We'll look back and see if I am right or not. Prediction number two, Giovanni Reyna will finally leave Dortmund. And I say that because although they do value him supposedly, and they keep saying they value him, he is behind Julian Brandt. And I do think that the multiple injuries have taken a toll on Gio Reyna, and I don't think he's ever going to recover his full form that we saw before that first injury. What we know Gio could do until he starts playing regularly again and finding rhythm and confidence. And I just don't think he's going to get that at Dortmund. I think he'll get games in patches in the second half of the season, sometimes maybe a start here or there, but mostly coming off the bench. And I just think that by the summer, that's not going to cut it anymore. He's behind Julian Brandt in the lineup, which is fine because Julian Brandt's the better player. But for him to reach his full potential, he needs to be playing, even if that's at a lower level. So if that means going to PSV or to a mid-table German club or an Italian club that really believes in him and thinks he can be a starter for them, then great. But he needs to do that. And I think by the summer he will. I think he'll only have a year left And I think both him and Dortmund will finally, I hope, realize that it's not really working right now. As far as where he goes, BMR, I honestly have no idea. I don't know. I mean, there's multiple options. Whether or not they, what price tag Dortmund puts on him will be interesting. He'll only have a year left, right, on his deal. They're trying to ask 30 million for Daniel Malen right now, which to me is way too much. I don't think Daniel Malen is worth that. So I'm kind of worried that they're going to put 25 mil on Gio. And for somebody who's been injured as much as Gio has, I don't think he's worth that, right? I would love him to go to Serie A, but to a good team in Serie A, like at Fiorentina, right? Or, in Germany, at least a mid-table team, not a relegation team where all he's going to have to do is run back and forth. That's one of the reasons he didn't get much playing time at Nottingham Forest. He's not a defensive player, and that's partially on him, right? He has to work on that himself, being a defensive player. But I don't think that Gio's going to make it in the long term at Dortmund. I just think right now he needs to recover his form. And to recover that after multiple injuries, I think he needs to be playing, and preferably playing at an easier level where he can sort of recover some of that form and confidence. So I hope he gets that move this summer. And I think that's ultimately what will happen. Not MLS. No, Alexi. We don't want him to go to MLS or Landon Donovan. That is way too big of a drop. I think he can drop down a level, but that would be dropping down multiple levels, and in my opinion would be unnecessary. Number 3, Kevin Sullivan will score his first MLS goal. Now, this might not be super like a tough prediction, but he is going to get more time in MLS this season. It looks like the new Philadelphia Union coach, Bradley Carnell, is being hired with the remit of playing younger players. One of the reasons they fired Jim Curtin was because they felt like he was not playing young players enough. I mean, results also played a part in that, but they've also given homegrown deals to a lot of young players now this offseason. They've given it to Neil Pierre, to CJ Olney, to Francis Westfield, and a few others. And obviously, Kevin Sullivan has his homegrown deal also. So I think there are going to be a lot of he is going to get a lot more minutes, and I do think in 2025 he will score his first MLS goal. I'll go one further. I'm going to say he's going to score it before his 16th birthday, which is in September. All right, so that's my prediction. Number 4, Mathis Albert will make his Dortmund debut. This is an interesting one. And Dortmund's, the trajectory that he has been on is, I would say it's Gio Reyna, Christian Pulisic level trajectory. Similarly, in terms of when they got to Dortmund, they were both put in the U17s, graduated very quickly from the U17s, and played with the U19s, which is exactly what happened with him. The difference is they were both 16 years old when they joined Dortmund, and he's just 15. So at 15 years old, he joined Dortmund. He spent, what was it? I have it here. I have the details. He played 464 minutes for the U17 team, where he scored 3 goals. They pushed him very quickly. In just like 2 months, they pushed him up to the under-19 team at age 15, and he has 8 goal contributions in 573 minutes for the under-19s. So he's very much on a trajectory where you feel like this guy is not too far away from his senior team debut. Now, realistically, he cannot make his debut until November because of a new rule that the Bundesliga made that you have to be 16 and a half to make your debut. Now, personally, I think that's not a great rule because I think if you're good enough, you're old enough, and you should just be able to play if you think that you're ready, if they think you're ready, which I'm not saying he's ready right now, but he might be ready sooner than November. So it's going to be interesting. So he will not make his debut. They'll probably push him up to the under 23s, and he'll go back and forth between the under 23s and under 19s. But I do think by the time November hits, he will be ready. I think he will be ready. I really do by November. And I think he's going to make his debut for Dortmund. The under 17s will make a World Cup semifinal. This is prediction number 5. I think that we have a very, very strong under 17 team. Not only do you have guys like Julian Hall, Kevin Sullivan, Maxi Carrizo, obviously Mathis Albert, but also you have other guys there like Austin Jones, the PSV young player, You've got a guy like Chance Cowell, Cade Cowell's little brother, who is much more technical of a player. And generally with under 17s, they do get released a lot more. Like part of our problem with the U20s is that we haven't always gotten players released when we should have. And so that's sort of hurt us having our full team together. Whereas with the under 17s, that is usually a bit easier to get them released. And so I think we're going to have a very strong under 17 team. And hopefully it's a team that I think could make a World Cup semifinal, considering the levels that some of them are playing at, if we can get the whole group together. American Ultras Talk says the under 17 should go into the World Cup with the goal of winning it. I agree. I mean, you have to go in that mentality, but I think they have enough quality to win it, certainly, but it's a knockout tournament. In a one-off game, anything can happen, right? Anything can happen in a one-off game, but I think a semifinal is a realistic projection for how this under 17 team will do. And that's just my personal opinion. The under 20s will make a World Cup quarterfinal. And it's wild because the under 20s also have a very strong team. They have a very, very strong team. Well, Pete, why aren't you saying their ceiling is higher? The problem with the under 20s is getting guys released is always going to be an issue, right? For example, if Daniel Malen leaves Dortmund, that could open up more minutes for Cole Campbell. And come November, he may be a regular with Dortmund's squad and they may not want to release him for the under 20 World Cup, right? There's a possibility that Pedro Soma could be playing somewhere. Diego Cochin maybe will get released, maybe not. Noah Kai Banks, for example, could be with their first team next season over at not Stuttgart, Augsburg, right? So there's a lot of quality players. Peyton Miller may not get released by the New England Revolution. There are a lot of quality players in the under 20 group. The problem is that those players do not getting them released is going to be hard. But in some ways it's a good thing because of it'll mean progress. It'll mean they're playing professionally. They're getting minutes with the first team. So on the one hand, it'll be difficult to get them released, but on the other hand, it's almost a good thing if it means they're actually getting minutes with the senior team, right? So that's my prediction for the under 20s. Number 7, Noah Kai Banks will make his USMNT debut. And I know this seems far-fetched, but considering our situation with the center back pool and considering the trajectory that Noah Kai Banks is on, been playing very, very well for their, under 19 team, has already been on the bench 4 times for them, although he hasn't made his Augsburg debut yet. He could be a regular with Augsburg's first team by next season, which is later this year. And we have friendlies the rest of the year in September, October, and November. We have friendlies, and that would be an excellent time to give some of these younger players who are maybe breaking through with their first teams a shot, right? And then on top of that, Tim Ream is going to be another year older, so that's a huge, huge question mark. I think Noah Kai Banks will make his debut. I think Matt Turner will find his club as a starter. That is prediction number 8. I think that he will realize that going into 2026, he needs to be playing. And so going on loan to Crystal Palace was never going to get him more minutes from Nottingham Forest, but I think maybe he has to drop down a level, even if that means going to the championship. Right? That could be something that could be better for him and maybe is more his level, and that's okay. But if he wants to be really sharp and ready for that World Cup, he needs to be playing the season before. And I think he will realize that. And I think that he will be able to get, if not a permanent move, at least a loan move to the championship or even MLS. Because at this point, it's better to be playing. And I know MLS is not a great place, but if it's letting him play, let's see. It has to be better than Meslier. Well, there's a question mark about Meslier. I mean, there's been a question mark about Meslier as, for a long time, obviously. But he's, this terrible again this weekend for Leeds. Like, could Matt Turner start for Leeds? Not if they get promoted. I don't think that he's a Premier League level starting goalkeeper. But possibly the championship, I think, could be his level. American Ultras Talk says, kind of think Turner might consider an MLS return. He may. Championship is the hope, though. Although last time he talked, he still seemed pretty motivated to try and stay in Europe and push himself. So maybe not. Maybe not. What about Portugal? I just don't know if his inability to play with his feet is necessarily going to help him in Portugal. And that's going to stop him from going to a big club. Bundesliga, certainly. Certainly. Bundesliga for a few teams, maybe not every team, but I think Bundesliga he could play in. I think he could play in the Bundesliga. But either way, I think this summer he will find a new home. And hopefully a home where he is a starter and we build his confidence and he gets ready for the World Cup. Prediction number 9, we will lose several high-profile dual nets. And I do say this with a heavy heart because apparently Pochettino has not talked to Nathaniel Brown. He has talked to Luca Koleosho from what I've heard. I don't know about Henry Chase. Now, these are important players that could be interested in playing for us. And Pochettino seems to think that he shouldn't recruit, that you should want to play for the US. And to a degree, I agree with him. But on the other hand, this is the US. This is not Argentina. We don't have, excuse me, we don't have the luxury of having guys that, like Argentina doesn't have a lot of dual nets. Either you're Argentine or you're not, right? And in the US, it's more complicated than that. Right? A lot of Americans are also from somewhere else. And so they have a lot of options. And so if you say, oh, I'm not going to bother to recruit you or show you any love, you just have to want to play for us, you might lose out on some people. Like we might have lost out on Yunus Musa if Berhalter hadn't recruited him, which to be fair, and there's plenty to criticize Berhalter for, but he was good with the recruiting. That aspect of his game was good as a coach. And so we may not have gotten Yunus Musa if we hadn't bothered to recruit. So I disagree with, Pochettino saying we shouldn't have to recruit. But ultimately, I'm worried that because of our failure to recruit, Nathaniel Brown's going to get called up by Germany in March. And Henry Chase is sort of putting it on hold and saying he's not going to make a decision yet. But if he doesn't feel the love from Poch, he could very easily go Japan or even Nigeria. I actually think Henry Chase now is the one that we should be going for because it seemed like he struggled a little bit with the Japanese culture of you have to show deference and respect to the older players, right? And maybe that feels like he feels a little bit more American in that sense, where it's like, if you're good enough, you're good enough. There shouldn't be a hierarchy just because the player is older. So I feel like Henry Chase would be a big miss. Obviously, Nathaniel Brown would be a big miss because we don't have a good backup to A-Rob right now. And, it just feels like if something happens to A-Rob, Wiley, Tolkien, Lund, there's not a lot of great options there. There's a big gap between A-Rob and the other three. So that's a worry. And I'm worried that we're going to lose out this year on some high-profile dual nets because of a lack of recruiting. And I think we have to be critical of that. I don't think we should just let it be okay because it's Poch. We have to say, no, look, you got to recruit, man. You have to. We can't afford to lose out on these guys. And number 10, I think Ricardo Pepi will become the PSV starter. And I think that will happen in the first half of the year. I think it will happen toward March. Around March is when, because right now, he's getting a lot more playing time, of course, than he did last season. Okay, so that's fair. But it still feels like De Jong, in the important games, they defer to De Jong, which is understandable in some ways because he's a club legend and he's their captain, and he was very productive for them for a long time. But he hasn't been that good this season. He hasn't produced to the level that Ricardo Pepi has, not even close. In fact, Ricardo Pepi's been a lot more productive. And it feels like at some point, even the natural bias towards the captain and the club legend, who was much better, of course, than Pepi in his prime, but isn't that anymore and is clearly on a decline. It feels like at some point, even that bias isn't going to be enough. And I think by March or April, he will become the de facto number 1 starting 9. But definitely, if not then, definitely by next season, I think he will be the starting 9 for them. by next season, and that will benefit us. And I think he'll stay at least a full year. And then after the 2026 World Cup, anything can happen. As has Poch spoken to Chase or Brown? I don't know. The reports are that Nathaniel Brown said nobody has talked to him. So if we're to believe Nathaniel Brown, then nothing has happened. Okay. But I don't know if that is, I don't know if it's true that he hasn't talked to Henri Chase. Edgar Moreno says he hasn't, and Edgar tends to have pretty good, reliable sources. I have not heard one way or another, but it sounds like if you listen to what Poch says and also what Nathaniel Brown says, he hasn't really talked to them yet. That would be my guess, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong about that. I don't know for sure. So those are my 10 predictions. 9 out of them were very positive, I believe, and we'll see if they actually end up coming through or coming true. And the other one, it's sad, man. It's depressing to think that we could miss out on some really good players because we're failing to recruit. You know, I just think that we have to be better. I really do. This is the disappointing part, and this will come out, and I'll talk about this maybe a little more in the roster video tomorrow. Poch is busy speaking to Miljevic. Matko Miljevic kicked out of Montreal after registering in a amateur tournament and getting ejected from a game for, I think, spitting on a player, and has had multiple discipline issues over in Newell's Old Boys, is still getting call-ups. He's going to be in this roster. I don't know, guys. Like, what are we doing here? I mean, to be fair, we don't know who else is going to be in this roster, right? There aren't a lot of MLS options in midfield, right? If you want to call up 7 or 8 guys, I mean, who are you calling up? Let's be honest. Who can you call up from that midfield? Diego Luna, for sure. Jack McGlynn, for sure. I mean, how many of these guys in MLS in midfield are like, yes, they have to be there? There really isn't that many. Caden Clark, okay. So that's 3. Who? Tim Tillman? I mean, sure. Is Tim Tillman better or worse than Miljevic? I don't know. I guess the main issue is his disciplinary issues. I think that's what really has people frustrated. You know, it's like, why are we calling him up? And also, it's Poch's old club, Newell's Old Boys, that he was actually, I haven't seen him play there, okay? But apparently he played quite well there, right? So maybe it's just a case of there wasn't really a lot of other options. So here we go. So American Ultras talk. I agree with these names: McGlynn, Bassett, Wolf, Kramaski, Luna, Gutierrez, Clark. I'm not as high on Bassett and Wolf as you are, but as a Camp Cupcake, sure. Right? It's like, it's Camp Cupcake. My thing about Camp Cupcake, it should be under 20, under 23 players only. That's what we should be using it for, to find new players, right? This would be a pretty decent list, American Ultras talk. There's not really a clear like 6 in there, but Miljevic isn't a 6 either. So yeah, it feels like a very weird one. I'll try to talk about it more on the on tomorrow's roster stream. But if we call him Miljevic, it feels like just a waste of time. And especially, I think it feels like a waste of time because we can go to Argentina to look for players, but not bother to talk to Chase or Brown, right? I think that's really the issue. So, Saul Martinez, hey, Pete, I would like to thank you for helping me to get through nursing school. I would play your videos to help me focus and finish my nursing school homework. Hey, man, I appreciate that. Thank you. And congratulations on graduating from nursing school, man. Good for you. That's not an easy thing to do. No love of Georgie. No, we don't want Georgie. But congratulations, dude. That's the way to go, man. Congrats. If anybody can spare a prayer for me, I don't know if you are praying, man, or good thoughts. It's been a rough couple of weeks for lots of reasons. So yeah, I appreciate all the love and all the support, guys. Tomorrow we'll have the video out about the roster. I'll talk more about it then, and we'll go from there. But thank you for hanging, guys. Smash the like button before you go if you haven't already. And if you're new, smash subscribe. Video comes out tomorrow. We'll talk about the roster when it drops. And then this coming weekend, we'll return back to the normal scheduling of having 2 videos per week. So the weekend video, which will usually be the top 10, and then something midweek. And I don't know if Tack has mentioned this, but the podcast might be coming back this year. We're talking about it. Hang in there, guys. Have a very happy new year, 2025. Do we know what time it drops? Not yet, Judgmental Deity. Still waiting to hear when it's going to drop. So have a great one, guys, and I'll talk to you. Oh, John, I feel that so much. I'm glad to see 2024 in the rear mirror. Horrible year for me too. Yeah, I feel that. I feel you, John. It was a terrible year for me too. Hopefully, fingers crossed, 2025 gets better. All right. Love to you all.